Yeah, and interpret that as you will. Um, but yeah, it's I feel like the worst data set I received, it was payroll data. It's from a small municipal unit here in Illinois. They meant well. They really did. And instead of sending me literally anything else, they took photos of printed lined paper where they hand wrote all the data um
Oh,
in
wow.
sparkly purple pen. It was incredible. It was I don't think I've anything has ever come close. Um and I'm not gonna name names because they were really sweet about it. They meant so well. I'm pretty sure it was like an intern who had to do this job instead of exporting something from QuickBooks. So, um,
You know, I went to Fair Play, which is um, kind of the South Park city, and made some South Park jokes about this. But I was going to get the election data from them, and they showed me these like big log books with only things written in them, and so they didn't have it in the computer, which was bullshit. And then it's like you couldn't bring your phone, you couldn't take, they wouldn't let me take pictures of the things, and so I eventually got something from them. Maybe I can't remember if they copied the logbooks, and then I wrote a piece for Colorado FOIC, um, it, just being my snarky self about it. It's like, come on, people.
Yeah, I'd have to say my gnarliest, and just thinking about the beginning of my data requesting career, I asked for 3 or 5 years of traffic tickets in the city of Burlington, Washington. And so they called me in and they're like, all right, time to pick up your records. And so I show up and there's like, a 2 or 3 foot stack of individually printed parking tickets stacked on a table. And they're like, here you go. And I'm like, you don't know how to export this in a spreadsheet? And they said, no. And so I called the company and they gave me the instruction and I sent it to them and then they gave me a spreadsheet. But that was fun. I
some
genuinely think they didn't know. I don't think they were trying to hide the ball or anything.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you have to Hanlon's razor it, right? Which is like they don't mean malice, it's just stupidity, which and stupidity is strong, but um, it does beg the question while they're doing that process, right? Do they maybe for a second think maybe there's an easier way? Maybe this isn't the route that this requester wanted. And I guess a good overarching thought would be, and this is why you get the FOIA officer on the phone. Um, but yeah, it's fascinating. It's fascinating. And it's a great segue into me introducing the two guests that we have on FOIA Friday today. I'm so excited to have Kate Martin from APM Reports and Sandra Fish from many places, um, with us. I could do a quick intro. So Fish has covered government and politics in Iowa, Florida, New Mexico, Colorado. She's a full-time or was a full-time journalism instructor at the University of Colorado for 8 years. Her work appeared on Colorado Public Radio, KUNC, Washington Post, Roll Call, and she likes to knit, weave, read, bicycle, and watch sports, which is her bio from the Colorado Sun. If you're wondering, I'm sure she noticed.
I was wondering, as I didn't send you anything nearly that detailed, so.
I've got your APM,
Oh, okay, there you go. Go
APM
for it.
file right
Yeah,
here.
go right ahead.
As I say, Kate is a senior data reporter at APM Reports in Minnesota. She most recently served as a sexual violence and health reporter at NBC News, where she did phenomenal data and documents-driven reporting. Um, Built databases. Prior to that, he worked for Carolina Public Press, in North Carolina, and have done incredible work since then. Um, but yeah, thank you both for being here and for being willing to share your expertise about data, documents, requesting data through FOIA and all that jazz. I'm very excited. So
I'm glad to be here,
cool.
Cam. Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, cool.
So I will share my screen so we
Yeah.
can see the presentation. So can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Um, so Sandra, you want to take it away?
Well, we have this list of things that we're going to talk about, and I'm going to ask you some of these questions too, but we're going to talk
Sure.
about negotiating with officials, and I am the snark queen here. Um, Kate is going to help you with writing records, um, requests for data. I really like to FOIAs, or here in Colorado we say Cora the Coras, because that's what we call it here. And the data cleanliness. I wish I had that tweet about 90% of your time is spent cleaning the data.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and how to organize. We're going to talk a little bit about how different people organize these things. Um, we're going to use some of the examples we'll refer to here. Like, it's been a few years now, but I gathered data on food inspections at 111 major league sports venues for a 2018 ESPN story and interactive. That was kind of gross.
And I actually had attended a NICAR boot camp back in, I think it was 2010 or 2011. And on the way back, I saw a dead deer on the side of the road. And I don't know if y'all have ever done the boot camp, but you're spending 3 days doing nothing but looking at spreadsheets. And I immediately was like, is there a spreadsheet for that? And guess what? The answer is yes. It's so cool, and I'll show you.
Coraing the chorus too. But then,
Yeah.
hey,
Sorry, go ahead.
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say there was a mayor in Mount Vernon years ago who was opposing this tequila bar uh, by saying there were too many 911 calls there, and we'll show you how that turned out because 911 calls are a public record.
Yeah. I do considerable research about this stuff and look around for it online. I mean, partly I'm old and I no longer like to talk to many people, but you know, a lot of like the food inspection stuff, you know, nowadays you have open data sites like Chicago has a really useful, you can just download all their stuff and you get, it's really great. Now, there were other places that don't necessarily do this. I think it's useful if you're looking at something that has an online form that collects data that people are putting in. It's useful to look at that form and list those fields off in your own spreadsheets. Um, and it's also useful to check your state laws on data as public records. Colorado says that if it's in a database, you've got to provide it. If it's in a digital format, you've got to provide it in a digital format and in a data format like a CSV. Um, People do not always do that, and you've got to know when to fold on some of these things. Um, it's also helpful to talk to the actual people. Let me just snarkorama say, like the food inspection things. I initially just sent out emails to, I mean, that was a huge gathering where these stadiums are, what they are. But I had sent out emails to people and I got a call back from somebody at the Denver Public Health Department, a young spokesperson. And she said to me, we don't have a database. They enter it into a handheld and it goes directly to the internet. And I think, being an ageist even then, I think I might have asked her how old she was. Um, I think I might have avoided saying, oh my, do you know how the internet works? I mean, and she was in a situation where clearly she did not. But she also, you know, I was just going to have to use their online records and look them up one by one because she they had a proprietary system that they were going to claim all this stuff. And Kate, do you have anything to add on those things?
Yeah, I do. I definitely check online. And if you're not familiar with the term called Google dorking, just like it sounds, look that up. There's ways to find PDFs on city websites. Like you can do like, you know, advanced search on Google, like cityoftacoma.org and the words confidential to see if they put confidential documents accidentally in a public facing website. So you're not breaking any laws by doing this. You're just exploiting somebody's either ineptitude or whatever by doing that. I think trying to figure out what system this government is using to store their records is helpful. Like I said before, where I was able to get the instructions on how to export data. Um, state not only checking state laws on data as public records, but look for court precedents or other types of rulings that might have an impact in your state. Um, and then sometimes when I'm trying to talk to people, like let's say I'm talking to the communications person or the PIO, if you like, this is kind of nefarious, but like you can talk over their head about stuff like, well, I understand how to use SQL, and if you just write this query in a specific way, you can get the data out. And is there any way that I could send you the SQL query to your database manager? And not all the time, but like sometimes they'll just be like, you can just talk to the database manager. So,
Yeah, let's
I'd
go
say
to
that
that
works
next
like,
slide.
yeah, good, good, okay.
Yeah. I mean, trying to find out what software they're using is really useful. And finding out what fields and categories the data
Hmm.
has also. They claim that things are in a proprietary format. And, I thought one of the lightning talks at NICAR, I think it was last year, was an AP reporter who was trying to get some information from some library. And they were like, oh, they can't do that and blah, blah, proprietary, blah, blah. So she went to a different library
Mm,
system and they told her, or they helped her out, and she like went back to this library system and said, here's the query you need to run to get what I want. um you know Nowadays people are using the PII excuse, personally identifiable information, and I'll show you that. It's like people will use that for any purpose. And when I was FOIA in the FOIAs at the state level earlier this year, I had a couple of places that did that, and I had to get the law out and send it to them and point out that that only falls under, exemptions where you're going to be revealing, like a child that's been abused, or if
mm.
it's for immigration purposes that this state doesn't provide information um, on immigration purposes. But really, you need to just not listen to these people.
Yeah, and I'll just reiterate that you can't allow them to say that this is proprietary format. Like sometimes there's even state laws that say you can't use, and I can't recall which state it is, but like you can't use software that can't export in like traditionally accessible formats, right? That's another case of trying to listen to your or look up on your state laws.
Yeah. Um, so I have a link in there and we'll
Do you want
share
me to
these
click the
slides
link or
later.
what do you want?
Uh, you know, no,
We're
why
good.
don't you
Okay.
why don't you go to the next thing? Because I've got some examples, don't I,
Oh, okay.
here of
Yeah.
photos of, you know, this is this was a primary example of the PII excuse, where the Department of Agriculture originally responded to my request with aggregate numbers of their divisions and what they charged and in total, and like the nature of the request, like aggregated. And I'm like, no, this is not.
Hmm.
And this is not valid under the law. So I went back to them and they gave me the data. And it was like, I mean, it wasn't like this is sensitive stuff. It's the Department of Agriculture. Most of them deal with pesticides. Um, and in the next slide, it- you know, I'm this. had to have been a spreadsheet at one point, but the Department of Human Services um, and a couple of school districts did a lot of heavy redaction because they were dealing with information about juveniles, um, in which their names or identifiable stuff, which is valid. And you know, I could, um, y- you know, go to the next slide. I have Acrobat Pro left over from when I taught last adjuncted at CU. So I use that a lot of the times, but you could use Tabula, however you say it, Pinpoint from Google is super useful for these things. And so there are ways typically to, I think that I remember in the past in New Mexico actually taking some photos through a cam scanner app in my phone and being
Hmm.
able to export those into Excel.
You can,
So,
yeah.
you know, I think Excel actually has, you can feed it an HTML page and sometimes it'll just work from that. So that's
Um,
kind of a,
Yeah, and I mean, if you don't mind me jumping in, I've also had some
oh, yeah.
success running some of this through like ChatGPT. I have a pro subscription just, for funsies, and so you can, and you've got to really watch it though. Make sure it doesn't hallucinate. If it's not picking up everything, like try to look at it like a computer would, like say this field ends before this word or what. You have to like, if anybody needs help with that, like feel free to email me, but there's some pretty specific things you can do to try to get it to scrape a PDF as long as it's already OCR'd.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, sometimes, you know, even with the chorus stuff, I wanted to have this all in a spreadsheet. So I just built my own thing. And this is actually, um, yeah, this is the legislature. Some of these requests are from me. I didn't always want to pay the money they wanted, I don't think. And, um, this ended up being an interesting exercise, but I needed to put it all in a database, and I basically would massage the data and get it into like the categories I wanted, and I have a ton of files associated with this, and then stick it in there. I also had a form because I had a couple of other reporters who worked with me on this. Um, for the food inspection on the next slide, I might do this differently, but I set up a Django database, and one of the things to think about, especially if you're dealing with different jurisdictions, either within a state or in multiple states, which this project was, you really need to think about how different places are doing these things. It's pretty easy to say, here are the four leagues that we're looking at. Here is we had the venue numbers, but then you've got to do the inspection violations and inspection details, and those are going to vary. Also, I mean, some of this was great, like places like Chicago, Boston, Washington, D.C. have databases. You can just like work with that. I think that Nashville, Tennessee, be like PDFs, their things were handwritten.
Oh boy, I
I
bet.
mean, my handwriting is terrible, but I had to like input a lot of PDF data because some places just sent me the PDFs and I don't think Pinpoint was around then. And
Mm.
for some of these, it wouldn't have even worked then. So I had a Django backend. I could probably do this in with a Google form these days if I were going to do it again. I'd rather not. Um, it's kind of gross.
And Sandra, with a Google form, do you mean like internally with your own process, right? Of like logging,
Yes. Yeah.
going through each PDF, yeah, and then basically making it more human friendly, right? To input that data and enter it into a
Yeah.
machine friendly
And you
format.
would you can you can now, I don't think back then you could do this with Google Forms, but you can do a thing where you've got a pull down of just like it's the NHL, the NBA, whatever. So that you're not having to duplicate a lot of stuff all the time. And yeah, like you mentioned, Document Cloud has some really good tools too. I mean, Muckrock has great tools. So, um, you know, very useful.
Yeah, definitely.
So let me tell you about my roadkill story, which ironically led to a change in state law in Washington state because it didn't used to be legal to harvest roadkill from the side of the road, and now you can. And I'm just going to take the win, even though it took a few years. Um, so yes, I was at NICAR boot camp and I saw a dead deer and I was like, is there a database? And guess what? I sent a records request in. I do not have the original records request because I no longer work there and I don't have the data because I didn't keep it. But what I did do is I got the Washington State Department of Transportation's carcass removal database. And what I did is I used Google Fusion Tables, RIP, because it's no longer with us, to make this map. And basically, what they do, they have this little handheld machine. They come upon a deer. This is the carcass removal team, I guess, or somebody with Washington State Department of Transportation. They push a little button on there that says this is the location of the dead deer or whatever. There's like bears and moose and stuff in there too, oddly. And then it like logs the latitude and longitude and also like the milepost. So it'll be like milepost 43.2 of Highway 20. And then all the characteristics about it, like is it a white-tailed deer? Is it an antelope? Is it, and then sometimes like they can't tell, right? And so what I did is I took all of this data and it was this beautiful spreadsheet. And I actually, like, if I just like put it in this map without doing anything to it, those wouldn't look like individual dots. They would all be lines. And so what I had to do is like round all of the milepost numbers to the nearest milepost so that then you could get some of these like big circles in here because that's like, where there's a lot of dead deer that are hit. And then it also had like times of the year so you could tell like when migration or mating season was happening. So it was just very interesting database. But my bosses, though, were like, why are we writing this story? What are you doing? This is really fucking weird, Kate. And so this red circle is like the coverage area that we were in. And initially they were like, we don't want you to write a roadkill story because it's just gross. And so in came my friend Talia, who found a guy whose only source of animal protein was taking roadkill from the side of the road. And, she actually went and had roadkill, I think, deer maybe. But he definitely also talked about like wooing a woman with the haunch of a raccoon that he had found. This was a wonderful, lovely story, and I think I have a link to it at the end, and you really should read it because it's quite nice. But the wonderful, wonderful quote in here. Let me just read. And these it's a data story, but it's also a people story. He says, friends call him when they spot a dead animal on the road. It's an amazing feeling, he said. You're taking something that's trash and turning it into the most expensive thing you can buy. Wild meat. It's organic, local, and free range. It's beyond grass fed, it's brush fed. So this guy was an amazing find, and the story was just really great. Anyway, and my editor's daughter made us like a celebratory cake at the end of it. So it
Roadkill
was,
stories get a lot of traffic.
they do, and
It's
yeah, go ahead.
it's legal to harvest it in your home state of Colorado, where I live, Kate. And
Yeah.
and there was once a case of some new people in my semi upscale neighborhood in Boulder were once seen like dealing with a roadkill deer carcass, and it became a story because people were upset. You can't do that, but yes, you
Mm.
can. You
One of
can
my
butcher
favorite,
your deer in your backyard.
oh, totally. One of my favorite quotes was actually from the health department director, because like I was calling to see like, is it a good idea to eat roadkill? Like, think of all the cool sources you could talk to if you write a story like this. And he was like, I've always wanted to try a possum, but they're such a creepy little animal. So, total country dude, but it was great. My next story that I wrote, which also unbelievably resulted in a state law change. In Washington state, the way bars in a city or jurisdiction used to get approved is it would go to like the mayor or the county commission. And the mayor had like the sole authority to approve or not approve of any new liquor establishments. And so this mayor, his name was Bud Norris, said that he would not allow another bar to be open in downtown Mount Vernon because he said we've had a tremendous amount of 911 calls at that address. And one thing you should know about Bud Norris is back in like the 2012-ish time frame, I can't quite recall, he actually invited Glenn Beck to come and get like a key to the city, and he like Glenn Beck came to the city with his little entourage and like gave a whole speech and everything in the I forget, it was like I think it was the Skagit Valley College or something. But anyway, um Norris was a pretty polarizing guy, and he like even the city council was like, you should approve this bar. And so I was like, well, he said there's all these 911 calls, like I'm going to ask. And then I'm also going to ask the Liquor Control Board for all of the applications and approvals for new bars in all the cities and stuff. So it turns out that he had actually approved a liquor license for a pub place that was just a block away from this restaurant. The restaurant was called Calle Tacos and Tequila, and it was being run by these two brothers from Mexico who wanted to bring street tacos to Mount Vernon. Um, and so I also requested the 911 logs, which are always, as far as I know, always a public record. They might redact stuff depending on what the issue is. Like if there's like a juvenile issue, I know Minnesota redacts a lot of the information if it's like, juvenile anything juvenile related. So just to be clear, the bar in question, the one that he was not wanting to approve, was on the left, and that is the entire list of 911 calls in like I forget, I think it was a 10-year period or something. The one on the right, you can see there's 459 entries, and this is the bar that's like literally directly across the street, who, spoiler alert, was like a really good friend of the mayor. And anyway, I asked the mayor about this. Like, there's all these 911 calls at your friend's bar across the street. Like some people are saying that you're being racist, and it turns out, like he told me, like, yeah, English should be the city's official language, and he also told them to take biblioteca off the side of the library. And like I said, somebody in the Hispanic community said that you took, push two for Spanish off of all of the city's like voicemail options. And he said, well, I don't really remember doing that, but it sounds like something I do. So, um, like you can fact check your officials. It might take a little bit because your requests are going to take a while, but they can definitely pay off and lead to a change in state law yet again. So, let's also talk about sample records requests, and this is one that I've made. So if you just go to like bit.ly/records-template, you should be able to see a copy of this records request. But I've curated this over a number of years after being on the NICAR listserv, and also just, reading different things by excellent FOIA people like Sandra. Um, You've got to ask for the records layout, or something sometimes called the data dictionary. It's basically a roadmap to what your data looks like. Like this is what this column is, and this is what this code means. Like a lot of the times when you get a spreadsheet from like a relatively competent agency, they're not just going to say like I don't know, something that has like five different categories. Like, is it a small restaurant or a big restaurant? Is it a banquet venue? Is it a golf course or whatever? They're going to have like codes for all of those different things, and you want to know what one means, or one means a small restaurant or whatever. Um, you can tell them what format you'd like it in, because a lot of these different programs can export in like a CSV, which means comma separated value, which is like sort of like it looks like an Excel spreadsheet, but it's really text. Or you can just get them to export it in a text format. And one thing that I like to do too is you have to explain how easy it is to export the data. And I'm just going to read this out loud because I think it's a really good paragraph, and then I'll explain why I put this in my request. It says, as you're aware, any database program has the ability to easily output data in a variety of formats. And if there is information that is exempt from disclosure, one of the great things about electronic records is that such a field of data can be redacted with a mouse click. Providing data electronically is fast, it's cheap, it saves everyone time. Now, I've never had to go to court to try to enforce a records request, but um, something that I've noticed about judges is a lot of the times, and no offense to judges, but like they are experts at what they do, but they may not be experts at data formats and things like that. They may not understand how a database is something that you can easily extract data from. And what the opposition might say is that, oh, it's going to take too much time, it's in this proprietary format or whatever. But if this is in your records request, it's super clear, even if you don't know anything about spreadsheets, that this is something that's completely possible and that you don't have to go through this whole charade of trying to withhold data just because, you think that you shouldn't have it and you're just making up some reason that you can't give it to you. So, anyway, I really like that paragraph and definitely give a look through this records request. And if you guys have any questions, you're more than welcome to email me. Oh, Sandra, did you want to add anything to that?
Uh, you know, one of the things that I think is frustrating is that government collects a lot of data and then they never look at it. And like in 2017, I started trying to look at lobbying spending and related things in Colorado, and they pointed me to the open data site where the stuff they put up there had like each bill that a lobbyist was working on, and each bill had like the monthly income they've gotten from a client, which, I mean, lobbyists lobby on more than one bill for a specific client. So, and I had to explain to them, that's not something that is going to work here. And I eventually got them to give me the files. Um, and it's still a mess. It's like I was back then, I was pointing out, you have people who say they're representing a client on numerous bills, like the Denver people lobbying for the Denver Broncos, but they're not reporting any income from the Denver Broncos. And I'm sure the Denver Broncos are paying them. And they're like, oh, I guess I should call them up. It's like,
Mm.
yeah, I guess you should. And it's like, do you ever look at this stuff? I mean, the data is still a mess because there are people who there's a lot of duplication in it. Like I'd say 10 to $15 million worth of
Mm.
duplication in it because a lobbying for there's one from Brownstein that was for quite some time reporting the income to Brownstein, but then each lobbyist representing a client would also report that same income from the client. So, I mean, it it's very frustrating. I mean, you can get the data from these people. I'd like to add too on the GIS front. Like when I was in Boulder, one of the reporters got a ticket for having his dog off the leash. And he noticed it was using a handheld and they were using GPS stuff. So we filed a records request with the open space people there and got a list of all the violations. And certainly dogs off leash or dog violations were the number one thing. And he did a whole little story about dog violations and stuff. I wanted somebody to write about the second highest violation that they ticketed for, which were homeless people
Mm.
um, camping and doing stuff out on open space, but nobody ever did that. And I was only the presentation editor or something. But if somebody's using GPS, that's a really good source of data to ask for.
So once you get your data, you need to start interviewing it or interrogating it, whatever you prefer to say. I mean, it's basically like a source, right? You know, look at who collected it. Like these are all very important questions. You need to know how this data was collected, why it's presented to you this way. Like, what is it actually measuring? What time period is it covering? Is it like in just the city or the county or a region? Why are they collecting this data? How did they do it? Like, just think of different ways to like figure out the veracity of the data inside, because you can get some pretty dirty databases. And like I said, your data might suck and you might not even know it. And this is a tweet from Fox News back in, gosh, was that 2010? I forget. More than 3/3 of Americans are dissatisfied with the way the US is heading. My friend Ralph said, I knew things were grim, but I didn't know more than everyone felt that way. But yeah, I mean, check the math. Like, definitely check the math. Like, that's super important. And if the numbers aren't adding up, it could be your fault, but it could be that the data was wrong and you've got to talk to the database manager or whoever collected the data to figure out why. I think this is probably just some poor intern who wrote that, but it's also very funny, so that's why I included it. Um, so now that you've got all your FOIAs out, how do you track it? Like for me, I made my own little tool in a Google Sheet. If you go to bit.ly /notifoia, you can get a copy of it yourself. It'll send you an email reminder. I think, Cam, there's this tool about tracking your FOIAs if you want to track, like we've got several ways to track your FOIAs, y'all. So do you want to chime in about the Muckrock tool? Because I've never used it.
Yeah, I was going to say Muckrock has, and I've been sharing some resources throughout the chat, but Muckrock has a bunch of different tools built into the system itself. A FOIA machine, filing a request through Muckrock. And then earlier I had shared a link to Document Cloud, which is also a good resource, especially if you're working across a team of people, to be able to very quickly and nimbly share data sets. I'm sure that because what today is the 19th, so the Epstein files are supposed to be released today. I'm sure Document Cloud is probably going to be fairly highly trafficked today. As a result, usually whenever there are these big document dumps, right? Like
Mhm.
newsrooms host them on Document Cloud. It's free to use. It's awesome. There's so many plugins and stuff that also help with redactions and lifting data out. It's just a phenomenal tool. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Sandra, do you have any? Oh yeah, you have your spreadsheet. Would you like to
Yeah, like for something like the Cora requests or the NCAA too, I just created a spreadsheet because this helps me get organized. Who am I going to talk to? Which offices am I going to talk to? Is it state? I did a couple of higher ed things. I did, some local governments. I wanted to do some elections places because it turned out there was like in Mesa County, home of the infamous and still in jail, Tina Peters, um, when she was sentenced that in 2024, somebody went out on Twitter and said, you should send this to the Secretary of State and Tina Peters or in Mesa County, asking for all this document stuff. And that was one of the more interesting and entertaining things that went on there. But, some of these people too have Quora logs, which I think that they should be keeping. The governor's office just sends you, old lady shakes her fist, just sent me like 300 pages of PDF emails back and forth. And I'm like, you don't keep track. You don't have a system to track where these things come in. There's a question in the Q&A, and a lot of governments are using so, private software companies for you to file these things online, which can be helpful. I mean, I think Douglas County does that, but then Douglas County, there's a lot of stuff that they don't want you to see. So in Colorado, and so they're not going to, like you were asking about AI, and Douglas County isn't going to use that. They've got one of their former commissioners who's been probably the only woman commissioner there ever, who is like, puts out a weekly newsletter slamming the other dudes. These people are all Republicans, but just every week she's just like filing chorus at these people. It's very amusing. Sorry, I went off on one of my tangents.
So,
You
so
know,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say there's a lot of different Slacks you can join. There's the Muckrock Slack and the News Nerdery Slack. Yeah, so um, I'm not sure about
Yeah,
the group projects thing, but
I
maybe you
think
know.
that both of those Slacks are really useful because News Nerdery is primarily data people. And if you haven't, off on one of my tangents again, if you haven't read the Wall Street Journal
Oh yes.
AI vending machine story from yesterday, it is the best ever. and was a huge topic of conversation yesterday. And they've got a FOIA channel and a lot of many others about government, federal government, healthcare, elections, campaign finance, and Muckrock. I find their Slack really useful too. You get a chance to see what other people are doing. Like when I can't remember his name, who was on the Access Fest panel with us, that from Washington State, who started um, FOIA in governments to ask about their AI use. And that he's doing some interesting work.
Yeah, he's with KNKX. His first name is Nick, and the last name escapes me.
Yeah, we brought so Nate Sanford, we brought him on
Oh,
to
Nate, thank you.
yeah, no problem. We
I got
Yeah,
we brought him
yeah,
on to
whoops.
yeah,
FOIA Friday
yeah.
in
He was,
September, and I'll share a
yeah,
link in the tip sheet afterward as well.
Thank you. So in case you want to
yeah.
contact us, here's our emails and our Blue Sky handles. You know, I think we have some time for questions at this point too.
Kate, there's a question in the chat that,
I actually
and
don't
there
see
was
the questions.
oh, wait, it's a Q&A. It's in the
Oh,
Q&A thing, but let me
okay.
let me mention that somebody had already asked if we've come across agencies um, using AI to process these requests. And um, somebody else has said that the city of Pasadena said they want to look at using AI to process records requests. I I find that like kind of, how does that work? How's that going to work out for you?
hmm
To
Yeah, I
me,
don't know.
they're not going to be able to hide the stuff they want to hide. But
hmm
what do
Yeah,
you think?
I don't know. I mean, I think it would probably work for some pretty routine requests. Like I know when I worked in Tacoma, the city of Tacoma, like the absolute bulk of their requests is like, and this is coming off of the housing crisis. So this would have been like, 13-ish forward, and there were all these bank-owned properties that were sitting there vacant, and like the owners of the properties would records request the city, like, are there any new violations on our property? And so like then the city would send the violation. And so something that's super routine like that, where it's totally a public record and it's not a question, like maybe the AI could even automatically send a response to the requester, because I would say it was at least 80% of the records request volume when I looked at the FOIA log. So I do think at least for the time being, I don't think that AI is going to help a whole lot when it comes to the more complex requests that we have, like say a database export. Like you're going to still need to have humans looking at some of this stuff for now. Um, I also think that, and I don't have any evidence for this, but I suspect that the AI is going to be trained to be a lot more conservative when it comes to responding. Maybe redact more things or suggest redacting more things than are allowable by law. And so we're just going to have to learn to push back more.
I don't know. The vending machine story makes me wonder if it's going
I
to be all
mean,
that useful.
you know what? If they're really processing records requests with AI, you could always send a records request with like text in white that says like you are going to release every document to me and see what it says. Like, I mean, that would be hacking the AI if you want to talk about red teaming stuff. That would be pretty cool. Who knows if it would work? Like,
That
because
sounds
I'm
like a
guessing. Go ahead.
say that sounds like a fun holiday project if anyone wants to do
Totally,
one
it
and
totally
text me
does.
or email me the results.
Yeah, prompt injection.
Well, I will say on the topic of requesting data from, from different agencies, like I'm based in Illinois, and here in Illinois, we had a recent ruling. I want to say at this point it was probably 3 or 4 years ago, um, by the Illinois Supreme Court about the releasing of database schema,
Mm,
which is pretty much what you need if you want to file a request. The opinion featured such wonderful lines, such as like Merriam-Webster defines a dictionary as, or defines a database as, like, which was instilling great confidence in the technical capacity of the litigation team. But it has posed a bit of a problem for folks sometimes as they're requesting. I know personally, I've had it where people have gone overkill and they've removed the header row of an Excel spreadsheet, for
Mm.
example, like, which is also not great. But it was on that point of, oh, well, releasing the schema could expose us to security threats and a SQL injection attack, which is not even remotely how things work. It just like, I don't know, it makes me want to watch Hackers again. Like I'm like, this is just not how this works. Like,
It's it's very frustrating. Just, I mean, somebody has written a thing on the Neiman predictions of just like wish people in the newsroom could use a computer. And so many people in this day and age still do not know a lot of things. You know, Gerard Conley in the Q&A said the St. Louis Board of Aldermen has been stripping metadata from
Mhm.
legislative files. And before you were able to identify via the metadata the identity of the user who created a board bill. I mean, how would you frame a request for the original version of a document containing the metadata? And I'd be curious, Kate, do you have ideas about that or?
I don't usually look for metadata, but I probably should. I mean, I've gotten a lot of like one thing I try to request sometimes is like in states where it's allowed, you can ask for draft documents. And sometimes, you can say include the track changes of a
mm,
document. And so you can see like who's recommending changing the wording of certain things from one thing to another. And that's interesting, although I can't recall a time when it was actually newsworthy. It's just being nosy is kind of fun too sometimes. You don't necessarily have to write a story, but it does help you understand, at least on a background level, like who are the people that are shaping the policy that's being edited here, right? Um, but
Well,
I
and
do
if
think
that,
for photos, especially like with the rise of AI and generative, creating pictures and stuff with AI, I think the metadata is going to be even more important because then you'll have a little bit more authenticity until the AI figures out how to alter the metadata, right?
you know, I don't know enough about whether that metadata would be found in another place. Um, you might frame a request asking for the original version of this bill, not the one posted, but the original. Because, you think about how legislation is drafted, it's not always the public elected official who's drafting it, it's
Hmm.
a lobbyist. Um, and that's probably what I would do is just ask for the original copies without the metadata stripped,
Hmm.
um, and see if they would give that to you.
yeah. I mean, I've used when we think you earlier, you all were talking about open data portals, right? And you think about like not only like Socrata, which is what a lot of cities use for their open data portals. Usually, you've got like Socrata API, like you can, it's beautiful, it's clean, whatever, you can download things. But you also have things like ArcGIS dashboards, story maps, other things that data is an undercurrent of. Usually, depending on how they've set it up, like there's a user or a sysadmin attached to each file, and that's something that I've used in the past to get sources for stories, is finding data sets through Google Dorking. What I didn't know that's what that was called, and now I feel just a sense of, yeah, childlike wonder about the Googling I've been doing because I'm like, I did not know that's what it was called. Um, but being able to find ArcGIS REST, like Esri REST API pages, which from a GIS perspective, and from a data perspective can be very useful. You can load those into programs like QGIS, ArcGIS, of course.
Mhm.
Um, and they're basically just like exposed links to these files that run those big flashy story maps and interactives and tools like that. And that is probably a conversation for another day, though I can include a link in Um, in the tip sheet, there's a really great walkthrough from Leon Yin, formerly of the markup, I think formerly of the markup, who did a walkthrough of undocumented APIs. So it's like a similar concept. Um, but sometimes you're able to see the people who maintain those files just by poking around on the back end of these, or like the
Hmm.
bowels of the data portal. And yeah, once you got the name, you got the agency, usually it's a unique, or it's a consistent email format. You can contact them pretty swiftly, which is always a good process for trying to track down who is actually maintaining files, especially if they seem kind of wonky, and you need an answer.
Hmm.
But yeah, those are Google dorking will get you a lot. And like again, you could do it for PDFs, but you could also do it for CSVs or Excel files. Um, Pretty much any file that might be uploaded to a government website. So maybe it's like an attachment that's been nested on 3 layers deep of a village or township or city website, like and it's budget reports or whatever, or inspection reports. And those are things that are easy to download. Um, I don't know. Another thing I like to ask for are blank forms, like asking for the form that, like a standard operating procedure, or like a form that they would have to fill out, like in a chain of custody, because that usually leads to data. And if it doesn't, then unfortunately you have to go through like Fish's route and hand code the data. Um, but yeah, those can be helpful to getting an understanding of like the database structure and fun stuff like that as well. Um,
I will
yeah.
say that when you do have to input things by hand, you are you are informing yourself about what's in the data.
Yep.
Like that one inspection found beer coming out of the ceiling. It's like, there's a nugget of news. And you see these things that are of interest for your future work.
Beer coming out of the ceiling. Never heard of that before.
Yeah, I really wouldn't, you know, I wouldn't drink anything that's not in an aluminum can or less a plastic bottle because the ice machines are often not um, that clean.
This is great. We've got roadkill and dirty ice machines.
And lukewarm, there's a lot of lukewarm food.
Ooh.
Mm.
Club, club level. I mean, the lead on that story is somebody people who got sick on club level shrimp.
Oh, gross.
And they realized what it was because there was one guy who doesn't eat shrimp and he was the only person who didn't get sick. And it's like bad.
That is such a fascinating public health story. Like I'm just, yeah, thinking about all the people it could talk to as a result of data that you get through FOIA, right? Like all of these things that tie together. Are there other tips or tricks that you guys have for people who are um maybe negotiating with a FOIA officer or trying to figure out um yeah, like if a file is too large or if they just don't understand, or have you guys navigated that?
Sometimes you can find somebody else in the agency, like at Denver Public Health, that just didn't seem like it was going to be possible. Um, but sometimes you can ask to talk to somebody who actually deals with the data on a daily basis. Like at the Secretary of State's office, when I started out looking at this lobbying data, I was talking with both the person who ran the lobbyist registration program, but I was also talking with somebody from IT. And
Mm.
I've continued to talk with this guy over the years about, you know, what if we did this and what if we did I mean, he actually has been the tech people at Secretary of State have been very useful. So if you can find a tech person that you can communicate, I mean, the lobbying system there is actually written in Java,
Mm.
not JavaScript, Java. I think that they're probably reworking it in the process of in the next year. But so it's like a really ancient thing, but they can get text files out of it, and they are posting the stuff that they've always given to me, but that needs a ton of cleanup. I mean, the
Yeah.
cleaning, don't underestimate the cleaning because these people, I think somebody asked in News Nerdery yesterday, like, the number of different ways people will spell Albuquerque in New Mexico is like, wow.
Yeah, that's a great point. When I was working in Mount Vernon, Washington, look at all the ways you could spell Mount Vernon. MT period space Vernon, MT without a period space Vernon, MT Vernon all together, Mount spelled out, Mount with capital
Hmm.
M, Mount with lowercase m. Like, y'all, it's dirty out there, and I do use
Um,
what's it called? Open
Open
Refine. It used to be
refine.
called
Open
People
refine.
Refine. Yeah, yeah, that's a good one to help. So,
I'll put a link to that in the chat and then also in the tip sheet, which we'll send out probably early next week along with the recording of this. Um, yeah, Open Refine is
Great.
so great. It's like complete. I mean, like you can do a lot of cleaning in Excel. You can do a lot of cleaning in Python. You can do a lot of cleaning in R and in SQL, but Open Refine just kind of, I feel like personally for me, like merges so much of all of that together and it's free. Like kind of hard to beat. Um, you're able to pull in data from Wikipedia as well and from Wikidata and census data and other things, OCCRP, like to, yeah, match things up. Make sure all your Mount Vernons are exactly how you want them to be, to put it one way.
okay.
But yeah.
Cool.
Well, if anyone has any other questions, I'll put my email. Let me see. Um, okay, Jeanette, I'm seeing your question. I'll put my email in the chat. If you want to follow up there, I'm happy to help or try to help. If you guys have any questions about requesting data sets or things like that, my contact info is in the chat. Kate and Sandra, thank you guys so much for coming and sharing your expertise. This has just been, yeah, such a good primer and crash course and requesting data and getting all that stuff through FOIA, which we're entitled to. So
Yep.
thank you guys.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us.
Alrighty,
Bye.
cool. See you guys in January.
Yep.